The Curse of the Headless Men of the Nahanni Valley. There are a couple of names that the Nahanni Valley is known by: Mountain of the Headless Men or Valley of the Dead Men. So inhospitable was the Nahanni Valley that even in the 1920s it was still unexplored. Maps of the region showed almost nothing except two flat lines that indicated the two main rivers, Nahanni and Flat. It would take decades for an accurate map to be created. Legend has it that the Nahanni Valley's past is adorned with tales that evoke a sense of both wonder and dread. Stories of gold prospectors lured by the promise of untold riches, a network of caves shrouded in an air of mystery and reputed to be cursed. These subterranean passages, known as the Cursed Caves, hold an irresistible allure for the intrepid souls who dare to venture deep into their depths. There are many local tribes that tried to settle in this area, such as the native Dine. One particular tale stands out: the legend of the Naha giants who roamed centuries ago. They wore grotesque masks with striking paintings and also practiced cannibalism. One of the specialities was to decapitate the victims. Their legacy came to an end when the entire tribe inexplicably disappeared. However, the Dogrib and Inuit tribes of the area had a different explanation of the obscure aura of the valley. For centuries, they feared a violent race of ape-like humanoids that they called the Nutluk, as well as the large canid creatures called the Wahila, were responsible for the misfortune of this area. The Wahila were believed to be evil spirits that protected the land against human intruders. They traveled alone and looked like white wolves with the broad face and clawed paws of a bear, taking only the heads of their victims. In 1964, John Baptist, a European, along with his trapper companions, reported a frightening encounter with these Nutluk, describing them as a hairy, bearded Neanderthal race less than 5 feet tall, dressed in moose skin and carrying clubs. In the 18th century, mysterious stories began to spread about this place with the increase of immigration. In 1908, the brothers Willie and Frank McLeod came hungry for the fame of gold in this area. They soon discovered that the land was too wild and harsh. Both men disappeared after a few months without anyone knowing what had become of them. Months passed, and the severed heads of the brothers were found. The McLeod brothers were not the only ones to experience this brutal tragedy. A few years later, a Swiss explorer arrived in search of gold, Martin Jorgensen, who was found months later in his cabin with his body burned and his head missing. Through the years, the mysterious deaths and the disappearances continued to occur. Hunters appearing in their sleeping bags without their heads, or explorers appearing frozen and decapitated at the same time. Strange Mysteries of the Nahanni Valley. May was a little Metis girl whose family was from Fort Simpson in the Northwest Territories. In the summer of 1921, she was traveling with a band of Indian hunters through the mountains in Nahanni country. One day while on the trail, May went missing. Some of the hunters broke away from the main party and set out to look for her. They found her trail pretty quickly. For some reason, she left the game trail they were following and wandered off into the woods. As they followed her tracks deeper into the forest, the hunters found articles of her shredded clothing hanging on tree branches, as if she had taken them off and placed them there deliberately. Eventually, they collected enough of these articles of clothing to conclude that May must be completely naked by now. At the time of year they were searching for May in Nahanni country, the mosquitoes were absolutely brutal and would have made short work of any of the hunters had they been naked like May was. Yet, May's trail continued on, winding its way all the way up into the mountains. Eventually, May's trail stopped at the base of a cliff. It was almost inconceivable that she scaled the rock, but sure enough, when some of the hunters free climbed the rock, they found the little girl's moccasin tracks on the ledge above. The hunters followed May's trail for a total of 9 days before finally giving her up for dead. All these men were excellent trackers in superb physical condition, yet bizarrely, they were unable to catch up with little May Lafferty. The girl's body was never found, and her fate remains a mystery to this day. On June 12, 2005, David Horsey, age 60, and Frederick Hardisty went to Rod Gunderson's cabin, 77 miles northwest of Fort Simpson. Rod was a good friend of the two men and saw them alive and well at the cabin. Both Hardisty and Horsey were described as experienced bushmen, or men who were good at surviving in the wilderness. But when Rod returned 4 days later, David and Freddie were missing. No note had been left, and the cabin had been left in a suspicious state, although the authorities quickly dismissed foul play. The same day they were reported missing, the RCMP, or Royal Canadian Mounted Police, started a search, but ended it on June 23rd after only a week. An employee from the Department of Environment and Natural Resources also used a thermal imager to search for the men. When the official search ended, friends and family continued looking for the men, not wanting to give up on them. Constable Brad Parker of Fort Simpson RCMP said, "Anybody that we've talked to has said there's really no reason why they left the security of the cabin. There are no apparent signs of any problems that we can see. They left the cabin without any firearms. The firearms that were stored at the cabin were still there. There was plenty of food and shelter there, so nobody can seem to speculate as to why they left." On June 27, 2005, David's body was found in thick bush, 2.3 miles away from the cabin. Strangely, a member of the search team, Jonas Antoine, said Horsey had burns on his hands and arms. The area was searched several times before the body was found, but it was said the bush was so thick that teams missed the body. The body was flown to Edmonton for an autopsy. Following this, the police brought in a police dog from Grand Prairie, Alberta, to help with the search for Fred. Then, on July 8, 2005, a search team found the body of Fred floating in the North Nahanni River about 12.5 miles away from the cabin. It was an area that searchers had already covered several times in canoes and on the shore. It was determined by the coroner that Horsey died of hypothermia and Hardisty drowned. No other details of the autopsies are available. The Lidili Kwe First Nation and members of the men's families called for a public inquiry into the disappearance and deaths of these men. The family filed a complaint in 2005 about the way the RCMP handled the case. The RCMP investigated, but they did not find anything wrong with the way the case was handled. Joseph Horsey, David's stepbrother, said, "There was something else that happened." He said that when the search began, the RCMP didn't cordon off the cabin because there was nothing to indicate foul play, and that the search party and RCMP were camped out near the site during the search, which disturbed potential evidence. Joe Horsey was part of the search party for the two men, and he said they found strange things at the cabin. There were bullet shots all over the place, and there was a gunshot in the floor. The picture is bigger than just two guys, one who died of hypothermia and the other who died of drowning. There was something else that happened before all that came down, said Joseph. After the bodies were found, Joe Horsey said he asked the RCMP again if they would be investigating. He said the RCMP said they would not be, because all the evidence had been contaminated by the search party. Robert Hardisty, Frederick's brother, said his family wasn't satisfied with the RCMP's handling of the case either. "There's too much evidence. They didn't look at what we found." Adding, they found his brother's shirt with a big hole in it, like a shotgun blast. "It's like Freddy calling out for help or something, and you can't do nothing." Other bodies found. In 1962, the pilot of a light aircraft miraculously survived a crash unscathed and set about building a camp a short distance from the place where the plane went down. He was so well equipped to survive, with food, fuel, shelter, and camp provisions from the aircraft's cargo, that he was confident that rescue would come within a matter of days. So, he waited and waited and wrote about his experiences in his diary. Many times he watched as searching aircraft flew overhead, but no one saw him. He was roughly 6 miles from his destination. For around 50 days, he sat alone, waiting for rescue, and then he mysteriously disappeared as the diary entry stopped abruptly. 6 months later, his plane was discovered by chance, followed by the camp in his diary, and to this day, no further trace of him has ever been found. In 1931, another body was found. This time, it was that of Phil Powers. His charred remains were discovered in the ashes of what was his cabin. The RCMP were quick to attribute his death to a faulty stovepipe, but their explanation was repeatedly debunked by various sources. It's speculated that Phil Powers was likely murdered and his cabin set ablaze. In 1928, one prospector named Angus Hall ventured ahead of his party and was never seen again. Another pair of prospectors, Joe Mulholland and Bill Epier, disappeared in 1936. For many years, they were searched for, but never found. The only thing discovered was their cabin, burned down to the ground. A woman named Anne Laferte also went missing in Nahanni. In 1926, with her hunting party, she was present in the valley near Flat River, but got lost in the wilderness and disappeared. Many months later, a Native American by the name of Big Charlie claimed to have seen the woman climbing a hill while totally naked, seemingly having lost her mind. She, just like many others, became a victim of the wild Nahanni Valley. It has been said that the Nahanni Valley may well be a lost world, a remote land stalked and guarded by surviving relics of a far earlier time. Is the Nahanni Valley home to malevolent spirits, or is this all just coincidence? Let us know in the comments below, and as always, thanks for watching.